Hello everybody, my name is Christian Swenson. I do videos here on YouTube about autism, autistic consciousness, and life on the spectrum. Today I wanted to do a video about an autistic character. Not explicitly autistic, he's never diagnosed. I don't think autism was really a category when the book was written, maybe it was, but it's in a famous work of literature, a famous short story called Funes, I don't know how to pronounce it, it's Spanish, His Memory. It's by a famous author, Latin American author named Jorge Luis Borges. Probably the most famous Latin American author, I would say. I've taught him before. I don't know how well. But this short story is about a boy who remembers everything, every detail, every texture, every number, every gust of air, every butterfly wing, and he doesn't forget any of it, but he's incapable of abstraction. And there are certain types of autism that this is really accurate for, like the savant, the person, like Rain Man wasn't autistic, what's his name? I forget his name. The guy who Rain Man was based on, but he had a lot of the symptoms. And he was able to just recite all these facts and numbers. There's another guy, I forget his name, but he was in a book by the psychologist Alexander Luria. The book is called Mind of a Mnemonist. I've mentioned it before. He's just able to remember everything because his memory is visual. It isn't semantic, it's visual, and he can remember everything, but he can't make connections or inferences. So I don't want to read the whole story to you. I just want to read parts to you and kind of comment on it a little bit. So here's the first paragraph. I recall him, though I have no right to speak that sacred verb, I recall. Only one man on earth did, and that man is dead. See, it's interesting. He's already referencing the guy he hasn't spoken of yet. Holding a dark passion flower in his hand, seeing it as it had never been seen, even as it had been stared at from the first light of dawn to the last light of evening for an entire lifetime. I think that's what autistic people do. We see things as they've never been seen. We give the pleasure of a new point of view to the things we're viewing. We glorify the world. We are a light that gives our glory, that gives the world glory, so to speak, in a new light. I recall him, his taciturn face, its Indian features, its extraordinary remoteness behind the cigarette. I recall, I think, the slender leather braider's fingers. I recall near those hands a mate cup with the coat of arms of the Banda Oriental. I recall his voice, the slow, resentful, nasal voice of the toughs of those days, without the Italian sibilance one hears today. He describes later how Pedro Leandro Impuche has written that Funes, this man who can see, this boy who can see and remember everything, has written that Funes was a precursor of the race of Supermen, a maverick and vernacular Zarathustra, referencing Nietzsche. And I will not argue the point, but one must not forget that he was also a street tough from Fray Bentos, with certain incorrigible limitations. Now, this is an attitude I see among many autistic people, and in many ways it's justified. The belief that we are the beginning, like the X-Men or whatever, of a new species, a new way of being, or something like that. And I think that is healthy in some ways, but maybe unhealthy in others. It emphasizes our separation, so to speak, to think that we're different and superior. But it also recognizes our value. Where does he describe? Ireneo began, that's his first name, began by enumerating in both Latin and Spanish the cases of prodigious memory catalogued in the Naturalis Historia. Cyrus, the king of Persia, who could call all the soldiers in his armies by name. Mithridates Euraptor, who meted out justice in the 22 languages of the kingdom over which he ruled. Simonides, the inventor of the art of memory, which is actually memory palaces, that's what that is. And Simonides was a Irrelevant, yeah. Metrodorus, who was able to faithfully repeat what he had heard, though it be but once, with obvious sincerity. Ireneo, so he's basically info dumping, said he was amazed that such cases were thought to be amazing. He told me that before that rainy afternoon, when the blue roan had bucked him off, he had been what every man was, blind, deaf, befuddled, and virtually devoid of memory. So this actually happens through a kind of brain injury. So it's not quite autistic, but it's autistic behavior. He had lived, he said, for 19 years as though in a dream. He looked without seeing, heard without listening, forgot everything, or virtually everything. When he fell, he had been knocked unconscious. When he came to again, the present was so rich, so clear that it was almost unbearable, as were his oldest and even his most trivial memories. It was shortly afterward that he learned he was crippled. Of that fact he hardly took notice. He reasoned or felt that immobility was a small price to pay. Now his perception and his memory were perfect. Don't take it for granted if you have gifts like that, even if they come with corresponding curses. With one quick look, you and I perceive 3 wine glasses on a table. Funes perceived every grape that had been pressed into the wine and all the stalks and tendrils of its vineyard. He knew the forms of the clouds in the southern sky on the morning of April 30th, 1882, and he could compare them in his memory with the veins in the marble building of a book he had seen on the eve of the Battle of Quebracho. Nor were these memories simple. Every visual image was linked to muscular sensations, thermal sensations, and so on. He was able to reconstruct every dream, every daydream he ever had had. 2 or 3 times he had reconstructed an entire day. He had never once erred or faltered, but each reconstruction had itself taken an entire day. I myself alone have more memories than all mankind since the world began, he said to me. And also my dreams are like other people's waking hours, and again towards dawn, my memory, sir, is like a garbage heap. That's kind of the paradox, is that the more infinite we are, the more garbage accrues. A circle drawn on a blackboard, a right triangle, a rhombus, all these are forms we can fully intuit. Ireneo could do the same with the stormy mane of a young colt, a small herd of cattle on a mountainside, a flickering fire and its uncountable ashes, and the many faces of a dead man at a wake. I have no idea how many stars he saw in the sky. These are the things that he told me. Neither then nor later have I ever doubted them. At that time there were no cinematographers, no phonographs. It nevertheless strikes me as implausible, even incredible, that no one ever performed an experiment with Funes. But then all our lives we postpone everything that can be postponed. He told me that in 1886 he invented a numbering system original with himself, and that within a very few days he had passed the 24,000 mark. He had not written it down, since anything he thought even once remained ineradicably with him. You see this in savants. They're unable to get rid of things. His original motivation, I think, was his irritation that the 33 Uruguayan patriot should require 2 figures and 3 words, i.e. 32 Uruguayan patriots, rather than a single figure, a single word. He applied this mad principle to the other numbers. Instead of 7,013, he would say, for instance, Maximo Perez, that's his word for 7,013. Instead of 7,014, the railroad. This is a synesthesia. Other numbers were Luis Melian Lafinur, Olimar, sulfur, clubs, the whale. These are all numbers. Gas, a stewpot, Napoleon, Agustin de Vedia. Instead of 500, he said 9. Every word had a particular figure attached to it, a sort of marker. The later ones were extremely complicated. I tried to explain to Funes that his rhapsody of unconnected words was exactly the opposite of a number system. I told him that when one said 365, one said 3 hundreds, 6 tens, and 5 ones. A breakdown impossible with the numbers, and then there's a naughty word, and a poncho full of meat. Funes could either could not or would not understand me. In the 17th century, John Locke postulated and condemned an impossible language in which each individual thing, every stone, every bird, every branch, would have its own name. Funes once contemplated a similar language, but discarded the idea as too general, too ambiguous. The truth was, Funes remembered not only every leaf of every tree in every patch of forest, but every time he had perceived or imagined that leaf. He resolved to reduce every one of his past days to some 70,000 recollections, which he would then define by numbers. Two considerations dissuaded him: the realization that the task was interminable, and the realization that it was pointless. He saw that by the time he died, he would still have not finished classifying all the memories of his childhood. The two projects I have mentioned are foolish, even preposterous, but they reveal a certain halting grandeur. They allow us to glimpse or to infer the dizzying world that Funes lived in. Funes was, we must not forget, virtually incapable of generic Platonic ideas. Not only was it difficult for him to see that the generic symbol dog took in all the dissimilar individuals of all shapes and sizes. Temple Grandin's talked about this. It's like you can't abstract, right? You see, it's like if you change the living room, completely different place, right? Because there are two living rooms. It irritated him that the dog of 3:14 in the afternoon, seen in profile, should be indicated by the same noun as the dog of 3:15, seen frontally. His own face in the mirror, his own hands, surprised him every time he saw them. I've mentioned that before. This is an autistic thing. Swift wrote that the Emperor of Lilliput, this is from Gulliver's Travels, could perceive the movement of the minute hand of a clock. Funes could continually perceive the quiet advances of corruption, of tooth decay, of weariness. He saw, he noticed the progress of death, of humidity. He was the solitary, lucid spectator of a multiform, momentaneous, and almost unbearably precise world. Babylon, London, and New York dazzle mankind's imagination with their fierce splendor. No one in the populous towers or urgent avenues of those cities has ever felt the heat and pressure of a reality as inexhaustible as that which battered Ireneo day and night in his poor South American hinterland. That's overstimulation for you. It was hard for him to sleep. To sleep is to take one's eyes away from the world, or his mind. Funes, lying on his back in his cot in the dimness of his room, could picture every crack in the wall, every molding of the precise houses that surrounded him. Off towards the east, in an area that had not yet been cut up into city blocks, there were new houses unfamiliar to Ireneo. He pictured them to himself as a black, compact, made of homogeneous shadow. He would turn his head in that direction to sleep. That's beautiful to me. He would also imagine himself at the bottom of a river, rocked and negated by the current. This is how the only way he can sleep is by finding a place in his overly conscious, prodigious memory and imagination that is quiet enough. He had effortlessly learned English, French, Portuguese, Latin. I suspect, nevertheless, that he was not very good at thinking. To think is to ignore, to forget differences, to generalize, to abstract. In the teeming world of Ireneo Funes, there was nothing but particulars, and they were virtually immediate particulars. The leery light of dawn entered the patio of packed earth. It was then that I saw the face that belonged to the voice that had been talking all night long. Ireneo was 19. He had been born in 1868. He looked to me as monumental as bronze, older than Egypt, older than the prophecies and the pyramids. I was struck by the thought that every word I spoke, every expression of my face or motion of my hand would endure in his implacable memory. I was rendered clumsy by the fear of making pointless gestures. And then here's the last sentence. Ireneo Funes died in 1889 of pulmonary congestion. There's not many words you can say for that. It's just a beautiful account of a world that many of us approach. A world in which thought lives in things. A world in which colors and sounds and textures and temperatures and fluttering butterflies and the surfaces of lakes and ponds and the surface of a dog's skin, all of that is perfectly itself, perfectly exactly what it is. And we are tied up with being. It makes you wonder how Jorge Luis Borges could have had this intuition. I suspect it had to do with his brain damage, actually. Yeah, when he was young, he was a poet, apparently. Only a poet. And he had a traumatic brain injury, and he was so afraid after recovering that he wouldn't be able to write poetry that he decided to stick with short stories. And he was really good at it. He wasn't damaged, but I think something changed. You can tell in his writing a tension between what I might say is the world of the two brain hemispheres. The world of looking at things from the outside, i.e. the left, and the world of looking at things from the inside, i.e. the right. The world of particulars and the world of the general. They aren't, as they are in most people, able to disappear behind each other. He notices the world of the particular. He notices the world of the abstract, and he is caught in that tension, and he explores it through those stories. I would encourage you to read more of Borges. Another short story that is very like the autistic world is the Zahir. I'll maybe read it here one time. It's something that could maybe connect to obsession and, you know, that narrowing of attention. But I like this. It was good. I'm doing one more video. It'll be released later this week. And I'll talk to you guys later. Take care.